Today we're going to do a video in a little bit different way because I want to open up a new subject that I want to do several videos about because I think this topic is really important. So today I want to start out with a anchor video that describes the situation that I want to talk about and lays the groundwork because there's so much to talk about in this area that one video is not going to do it. The video is about medical transitioning of children, hormones, puberty blockers, and surgery. As you know, this has become a big issue out there, and we're being told we're seeing a lot of issues going on about men and women's bathrooms, and are trans people allowed there, and what's going on, what's a woman, and children and men in sports and kids in sports and little boys and little girls that are pretending to be the opposite sex. And in school, a little boy is actually acting as a trans kid and coming to school all dressed as a girl and pretending to be a girl. And the same is happening with girls, pretending to be boys. And we're talking about kids 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. Now, those kids hopefully are not being medicalized. Hopefully they're not being offered any type of medical intervention at this point. They're just exploring and testing and things like that. The problem is that the psychology around it, the woke ideology around them with the teachers and the school support is encouraging a lot of this. And it's not natural, and it's not letting the kids discover. It's actually puts pressure on the kids, and they don't understand, and they don't see how they're being pressured. But when it's affirmed, even when a little boy says, "I'm a girl," and goes to school as a girl, and really doesn't understand when he's 9, 10, 11 years old and starts to hit puberty, and maybe he's going to grow out of it. Maybe he'll change his mind. But a lot of the time, these people encourage these kids. They say, "Oh, you're a good girl. You look great, blah, blah, blah." And the kids get very confused as they enter puberty. And then they think they're trans. And then they think they need these medical interventions, which they don't. The facts are that most kids, I'm talking about most, like 90%-ish type kids that have anything to do with this, will grow out of it. And by the time they're 18, most of these kids will just turn out to be gay or lesbian. And that's it. And they're well adjusted, and they're normal, good adults. They don't need intervention. And the few that have gotten intervention or maybe should get intervention is so tiny that the risk shouldn't be taken on these kids. These drugs are not safe. There's a lot of consequences to them, even the puberty blockers. And I suggest that and I'll be talking about this more in new videos, but you're going to see how these kids are affected by these drugs and these interventions, and how a lot of doctors don't feel that this is rational and is actually malpractice and probably should be illegal. But unfortunately, we have a whole ideology out there that's reached into the institutions, and it's not good. Anyway, I just wanted to mention all that because I reject that this is, let me go on here. So maybe you thought that you're a good person, you're liberal, you feel bad for these kids. So of course you support them being trans. Of course you want them to be happy and you want them to be healthy. But you really haven't been told the truth about what's going on and what these drugs do. So that's what this is about. And we're being told that this is healthcare. I question whether this is even healthcare. We're being told it's settled science. It's not settled science by a long shot. And we're being told that if you question it, if I question it, that we're being cruel. How dare we question these poor kids or the treatments that they're offered? And I reject that. It's not settled science by any reasonable measure. Children cannot consent to irreversible medical harm. They cannot consent to sterilization. They cannot consent to the permanent loss of sexual function, which happens a lot with these drugs. They cannot consent to a lifetime of medical dependency. This is not a political opinion. It's a moral boundary, and it's one I'm not willing to cross. And once society crosses that boundary, the only real question left is whether adults are willing to take the responsibility for getting this turned around and stopping this. This isn't a debate, it's a declaration. You can't have these kids uh, taking these drugs. You can't have other people deciding. You can't have teachers, and you can't have uh, the state telling you that you're being abusive if you don't let the child have the medical intervention that they so want at 15 or 16 years old, and you can be cut out of it. It's just not right what's going on. So let me break down for a second, because something important has been deliberately obscured. As you really sit with this, children, medical intervention, and the permanence of hormone drugs, puberty blockers, and surgery, a lot of these people notice something's happening, that your comfort level changes. Positions they once accepted without much thought no longer feel right. This isn't a betrayal of your values. It's what happens when you realize the real impact of what you supported can't be undone. And it happens when you realize the impact of what you supported because you didn't know about this before. Nobody told you the truth. And you didn't really look into it, which is what most people do, because if you're not affected directly, you don't look in for the details. I mean, that's no different than many other things that we take positions on in life. And here's the part people certainly don't always like to admit. When you actually confront what medical intervention on children really means, what is permanent, what carries risk, and what can't be undone, many people realize something uncomfortable but important. Had they been fully informed from the beginning, had they understood this from the beginning, they never would have been okay with this idea of kids transitioning. The risks, the trade-offs, and the permanence were minimized or left out entirely. That moment isn't confusion, it's your moral compass recalibrating. There is one moral answer here, and you know what that is. When consequences are permanent, when the patient is a kid, and when uncertainty is high, the ethical obligation is restraint, always. And look, this principle is not controversial anywhere else in medicine or in society. It exists because harm, once done, can't be undone. This is why we don't let kids sign contracts. This is why we don't let kids consent to sex. And this is why we don't let kids make life-altering medical decisions. Anyone pretending this situation is different, this is different, is asking you to abandon your principles you already accept everywhere else. And if you ever felt uneasy about this, if something in you hesitated or is hesitating now, that's good. It's not confusion. That's your moral clarity. Here's where things get uncomfortable. This line wasn't crossed in the institutions or schools because of overwhelming evidence. It wasn't crossed because of long-term data. It was crossed because pressure replaced judgment. Parents were told if you loved your child. Professionals were told if you hesitate, you're harming. Institutions were told if you don't comply, you're unsafe. Uncertainty was reframed as cruelty. Caution was labeled discrimination, and restraint was treated as negligence. This didn't happen because one villain forced it through. It happened because too many adults were pushed into silence or compliance under constant moral and institutional pressure. Now, here's the reality of what we're facing. Reversing this hasn't been easy because of a lot of places. Hesitation now comes with real consequences. In some jurisdictions, professionals can now face lawsuits or discipline if they don't follow the required language rules. There's a case in Ireland of this happening right now as I'm recording this. In some school systems, children are being socially transitioned at school without parents even being informed. So the little boy wants to be a girl, or a girl wants to be a boy, and they come into school and changing their clothes and living as the opposite sex. And the parents aren't even being told about it. In other cases, parents who don't go along with the child's desire to medically transition are accused of abuse. And in some instances, they've even faced threats to their parental rights. There's been one or two cases, at least, that I'm aware of, where somebody 15 or 16 has wanted to have this medical intervention, which they shouldn't, these puberty blockers and hormones, not at that age. They're too young to decide that, and they shouldn't be having it, and they're risky. These kids have gone to court, and the state has said to the parents, no, you have to do this for your kid. Your kid wants this, and it's abuse if you don't do it. It's insane. This is what the world that we're living in now. Once you reach this point, institutions stop asking what is right and start asking how they can survive legally and financially. And that pressure produces silence, not honesty. At the same time, most people recognize this once it's pointed out. There is a constant background noise around this issue. Articles, studies, and headlines show up again and again, usually highlighting potential benefits of kids transitioning and often treating these treatments as settled science, while rarely spending much time on the risks, the trade offs, or what happens if a child changes their mind later on. And a lot of them do. Matter of fact, the majority of them do. Most people don't encounter these arguments directly. They absorb them indirectly because they're not involved directly. They're not the parents involved. So they absorb them through headlines, workplace trainings, school guidance, professional expectations. Slowly enough that good, well-intentioned people don't notice how much the conversation has shifted until they stop and really look. And all of a sudden they've accepted things that they really didn't want to. And I want to say this plainly. What you're seeing here is not accidental, and it isn't small. There's an organized, well-funded ideological push, or what's called woke, largely driven from the far left, that has already made serious inroads at the highest levels of international and domestic institutions. You see it in global bodies, courts, universities, professional organizations, and in the language embedded into policy and training. You see it at the EU now. You see it in the UK now. You see it in front of Congress right now. You see the UN has a Children's Bill of Rights that's full of a lot of this stuff that if you read it and you understood with it, you'd be shocked that this is what's in a Children's Bill of Rights today. If you raised your children in the 60s or 70s or 80s, I'm telling you, you would absolutely be shocked. It's not the world that you think that we're living in. And yet this is what's happening in front of governmental bodies, in front of institutions, and like medical boards or university boards and standardizations. A lot of this stuff is coming in, and a lot of it is really, really awful. So, and for many parents, this isn't something they sense anymore. They see it directly. They see these changes in what the schools are teaching their kids, how early these ideas are introduced to their kids, and what parents are allowed to question because they are not allowed to always question anymore, and what they're told they have no right to opt their children out of. In some districts, decisions affecting children are being made without parents and deliberately kept from them. Medicalization of children is only one front in a much larger effort to redefine parental authority, childhood boundaries, and who ultimately decides how children are raised, even sexually. This video isn't about fighting every front at once. There's too much. It's only about drawing one line clearly, because this one line falls, every other boundary becomes easier to erase. Let me be clear about something, because this is where the people get pulled off track. This isn't about adults. This isn't about how someone chooses to live their life as an adult. And it isn't about telling grown people what they can or can't do. This is about kids. Kids need adults to slow things down for them. In this case, and we're talking here about transing the kids, but there are other proposals out there about sexualizing these kids and about pedophiles and about all sorts of stuff that you just think is on the fringe that is now being discussed in some of these institutions and some of these universities. And you're seeing it in some of the kids' rights documents at the UN and things like that it would shock you if you knew what was going on. So again, today this is about transitioning kids, but you need to know that a lot more is happening around them. Kids need adults to slow things down for them. They need boundaries. They need protection. And that doesn't mean that when you get to 13 or 14, they're adults, especially when decisions can't be undone. And we need to be honest about the broader landscape. There are people in groups, especially in universities, advocacy spaces, and policy circles, who see childhood and parental authority very differently than most people do. In those spaces, limits many families see as basic common sense are treated as a problem to be fixed. That doesn't mean that most people think that way, but those ideas carry influence because they show up in school policies, professional rules, training programs, and public messaging. So parents and professionals start feeling pressure that seems to come from everywhere, even when it doesn't match what they believe or what feels right. And here's the part that matters to me: if something really is good and necessary, it shouldn't require guilt, fear, or silence to defend it. It shouldn't fall apart the moment people ask basic questions. And it shouldn't require adults to ignore their instincts about protecting kids. If questioning something suddenly makes you the problem, that's a red flag. And noticing that doesn't make you cruel or ignorant, it means you're paying attention. Now, I want to talk directly to the people who actually matter here, not the activists, not the profiteers, and certainly not the ideologues. This is for the adults who feel pressured, uncertain, and quite uneasy. I've talked to a lot of people who feel exactly that way: parents, clinicians who don't feel free to speak, teachers who don't like what they see in their own schools, voters, people who were told this is settled even though it doesn't feel settled, people who were told you're not qualified, to make them doubt their own judgment. And if you're thinking this doesn't feel right, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do, stay with me. Things begin to change when large numbers of ordinary people understand what's at stake, when millions of adults learn the risks, the permanence, and the trade offs. The conversation shifts. Facts start to matter. Doubts stop being treated as cruelty. Change doesn't start with shouting. It starts with people stop pretending not to see what they now understand. And I think this is where we're at right now, where people are starting to finally realize what's going on. When your feeling isn't fear or ignorance, it's responsibility asserting itself. And I don't say this casually. Neutrality is no longer an option. We all need to join this fight. When the stakes are permanent and the subject is a child, choosing not to decide is still a decision. Silence doesn't keep you out of it. It hands responsibility to the loudest voices in the room. For a long time, people told themselves it was safer to defer, to wait, to trust institutions to sort it out. But deference only works when those institutions act with restraint. It's not what we're seeing today. When they don't, neutrality becomes permission. At some point, every adult has to decide what they're willing to accept being done in their name. This doesn't require confrontation. It doesn't require expertise. It doesn't require becoming an activist, and it doesn't require judgment. And saying no, quietly, firmly, without apology, is often enough. Systems don't change because everyone agrees. They change when enough people stop participating in something they know is wrong. And once that happens, pressure loses its power. This video establishes the line. In the videos that follow, I'll walk through how this system formed, who benefits from it, how parents are pressured, why professionals stayed silent, and why accountability is now unavoidable. But everything that comes next rests on this foundation. There's one moral answer: children cannot consent to irreversible medical harm, period. And adults are responsible for stopping it. If you've been carrying guilt that never belonged to you, drop it. If you've been waiting for permission, this is it. The line exists, and we're done pretending it doesn't. Thank you, and I appreciate you watching this video. Please subscribe and like this video, and you'll see more very interesting videos coming up on this subject and about what's going on that you're really not aware of. Thanks.